So hello again. Welcome back to the Journey Beyond Yourself Summit. Today we have Catherine Molley, aka Absolute Superwoman. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
I'm just going to introduce you a little bit because in my mind, you are just Superwoman. There is not just Superwoman, but you're Superwoman. There's so much to you. And I'm so excited to get to have a discussion about your work and your books and how you do what you do, because it's quite incredible. Catherine, you are a qualified communication expert. So you have qualifications in neuro-linguistic programming, body language communication, you're qualified disc presenter. You've also a businesswoman, so qualifications in business, leadership and management. I know that you've received many awards from the Australian Institute of Management and received international awards for sales and leadership and product development. And one of your gifts and skills is that you really engage audiences to be conscious in their communication style and encourage participants through your very fun and engaging interactive activities. I know that you're highly regarded. You have a huge reputation as a thought leader in the training industry, and you deliver presentations all over the world. You have this immense energy that you bring to everything that you do, whether it's keynote speaking or workshops or your own training. You're the director of AusPac Business Advantage, where you deliver soft skills to global companies. You were previously head of CPD Oxford Partnership, Saudi Arabia. You're an integral part of your local Sunshine Coast Council Education Task Force, a committee member for the Salvation Army, and I know that you do lots of fundraising to help in places like Africa, where you've built houses. I know you've worked in India, and you do so much for the greater whole. But you're also an author. So you wrote The $1 Million Handshake, which was a best-selling book and took you, I know, all around the world. And more recently, and I'm very, very privileged to have had a sneak preview at your new book, Conscious Leader, How to Lead a Life Worth Living Through Crisis and Beyond, which I'm so excited about and is so timely. So there's such a lot to you. You're an absolute powerhouse of a lady. You have 3 children. I know that you live now in the land on a farm with animals to care for and tend to. So you do so much. You happily married, you're an amazing wife, mother, businesswoman, author. You have this immense energy. So where shall we start? I know that your journey, well, I'll do a little bit of speaking for you and then you can correct me and fill in the gaps. So I know from reading a little bit of your new book that for a long while you went about and you didn't talk about your struggles that it had taken you to get to where you were. And everyone saw you as this super successful businesswoman, author. You would go on these huge international stages, on the TV, doing interviews with your book, The $1 Million Handshake. And now with your latest book, you've really dug into yourself and told us all of your story. And what I find incredibly inspiring about you being brave enough to kind of show those parts of you that are more vulnerable and human-like are the ways you always pick yourself up and go again. So I really want to get into what it is that you do to do that, because I think it will be really useful for our listeners. But let's start by you telling us a little bit of your story, and perhaps we'll start with the first book. So what led you to write The $1 Million Handshake?
Wow, interesting question. I was never, ever going to write a book. Everyone writes books. Oh, what's happened to my book?
Yeah, we can't see that.
There's something happening in my background. Everybody writes books. And, it's kind of interesting that we have these thoughts in our head. And, I started to instead of writing the book, I wrote training programs and delivered those. And eventually I took all those training programs and turned them back into a book. And what led me to do it was I kept being told, Kath, you should write a book. You know, people need to know this information. And it was what led me, of course, in a time of crisis to start my own business. And within 12 months, I had sold over $1 million of my products and services. And I realized, you know, what had led me to be able to do that, and that so many other people could do it. It was never about the sale, but it was always about the person and the needs of the people that you're meeting. And I think sales just naturally happen when we provide amazing service. So that was my thought process behind, you know, a lot of what I did back then. Unfortunately, it was in the GFC, so another crisis time. And, you know, now we're in another crisis. And of course, my second book's on the way. But during the $1 Million Handshake, what had happened was over my years, from the time I was 19, I'd started to study body language. And I was traveling to a lot of third world countries, and I noticed that they always connected and communicated with me through that handshake. Now, I wasn't always the best at getting the best prices and the best deals. And so I sat back and I started to watch to see transactions. You know, some people would walk away crying. Some people were really happy. Sometimes the seller would yell at people to get out of their shop. And so I started to understand that creating a win-win was more important, that the seller felt good and the buyer felt good. And what I learned to do was, you know, take it to that point where you had a really good deal, they had a really good deal, and created more win-wins in life. And I started to study body language. So customer service, product knowledge led to sales. And then I was topping sales for Queensland, for Westpac, and then it was Australia-wide. I then went in and started training in product knowledge and customer service. And when I wasn't having children, I met my husband. You know, I said to him, look, you might want to marry me because I don't want to have children. And he said, that's okay, I can't have children. Then we had 3 children in 4 years. Things changed. I left my job, I came home, and then I sold children's books, toys, and clothes because it helped give my children clothes, books, and toys. Plus, it provided a bit of fun, and I was still running a little home business during that time. So body language, I feel, is one of those things, you know, in the book, I talk about the conscious connection framework, and I created a little, you know, IP diagram around that. And, you know, I do think, you know, whether it's the chicken or the egg, whether our mind thinks something, then our body shows it, or whether our body's in position and then we can change that thought in our mind. But we react in 1/25th of a second before we even speak. So if that thought has already changed your body language when you see someone, and that's why husbands and wives can fight for up to 2 days without saying a word because they raised the eyebrow at the wrong time. True story. I think we've all experienced it. So everything kind of went into this book around connection and communication, body language, mindset, behaviors, which is one of the big 3. I think when we start to understand how we behave, I think it's gigantic, because then we can start to understand our domino effect and how to create win-win with others. You know, there's usually someone in your family that you might have arguments with, or there'll be someone at work when they come up, you kind of think, oh, here they come, don't ask me anything. And so how do you get around that? And how do you create win-wins and likability with people that aren't the same as you? And that's what the $1 Million Handshake is all about, connection and communication. So I created this book. And I remember coming back in the taxi. I'd just been at a studio, at the Bryn studio. I was in a taxi in Sydney, and I hung up from this conversation, and the taxi driver said to me, hey, Kath, he said, I hope you don't mind, but I heard your phone call. And I said, oh, that's okay. He said, oh, what do you do? And I said, oh, you know, I'm a trainer and a speaker. And he said, oh, no, I think you do something else. I said, I'm not sure. He goes, you're an author. And I said, no, I haven't written a book. In actual fact, I don't really want to write a book. He goes, yes, but someone wants you to write a book, and I'm really excited because I'm telling my wife I've had an author in the car today.
Wow.
So I was a little like, okay, universe, I'm getting the message. Book. And lo and behold, a company called Hachette, second largest publisher in the world, heard about me, a woman talking about the $1 Million Handshake and about connection and communication. They met me and then they paid me to write the book. But just before all that happened, I had decided when I finally was going to put this together that 1/3 was going to go to Watoto, which is a charity we've been working with since 2010 in Uganda. So that was kind of the spur for me to push me on to go, okay, this isn't about you, Kat. This could help. What if you sold 1 million books? This could, stop you from having to fundraise for the rest of your life, which is about me because it's such hard work. So that was really my big push, knowing that it needed to get out there, creating something bigger than me for the book. And then before it was even published in Australia and New Zealand, an international company, Orion, purchased it and the international rights. And then they made it Business Book of the Year for Seven Dials in UK. So it's just making its way around the world now. It's been printed in traditional Chinese and Vietnamese, and it's just been released in America and Canada by Amazon.
How does that feel?
Yeah, it feels like the dream that I had for it. I haven't got my 1 million copies sold, so please, if anyone's out there, feel free to buy it. What's happening to the other 2/3 of the money? So 1/3 is going to charity. My husband said, how can you give 1/3 away? Because we lost a lot in the global financial crisis. And I said, well, look, I'll give 1/3 to you. And he went, oh, okay. And I said, I'm going to put 1/3 back into education. So that's the split of the money at this point in time.
I'm surprised he's not buying it up. But awesome. So we've got so much to talk about, but before we move on from the $1 Million Handshake, because you've got a new book now, give us some, can you give us your top 3 or your top 5 or something from the book? Because I know it came from your courses and your workshops. So what are the biggest, the tools that you can give us that have the biggest impact, or the problems that you have that you can solve quickest? Give us some practical insights.
Okay. So the first thing I would say to everyone out there is to believe in yourself.
Yes.
When you believe in yourself, others can believe in you too. And, my husband used to say to me, oh, you can't do this, you couldn't do that, or you wouldn't be able to run this. And when he fell ill and I went into the business, not only that, but in the first month of being in the business, I sold 5 houses and 3 on one day, which was a record for the business in a financial crisis. So you've got to believe in yourself first, and then others believe in you too. So I think that is the number one thing, just write it down. We've all got so many skills. We've all got gifts that we've been given, and play to them. Do the thing that makes you the most happiest in life. And this is all around mindset. So mindset's really important. I say, even when my children went to school, do the subjects you love, because you can do anything you want in the world, which is exactly what they're doing. But choose the things that you'd love to do. And then you'll feel a lot happier while you're doing them, and you won't complain to so many people about it later. So that's sort of our mindset, believe in yourself. The second thing is with body language, just to remember that in a nanosecond, you can change the way you feel. So, sometimes I'd be on a plane, I'd fly 36 hours, I'd get on stage and they'd fly me somewhere else, and I mightn't have slept properly for 2 days, but am I going to turn up tired and grumbly about that? No. No, in an instant, you can just pull your shoulders back, lift your head up a little bit, and all of a sudden get energized. If I was like this, am I going to feel good? Probably not. So in a nanosecond, you can change the way you feel through your body. And the best thing about that is it changes the way someone else feels about you too. So, it's your body language is huge. And then being able to, the third thing I'd say is, you know, without you doing the book and without you being able to pick up everything about behaviors in there, the third thing that I would say would be to step back and just replay a situation that's happened. Step back and have a look into a situation that's happened that didn't work too well for you and see what might have dominoed from the way that you spoke, perhaps, or perhaps the way that you behaved, you know, in those first seconds of that meeting. And I think reflection is one of the big things we need to do.
Yes.
So reflect would be my third tip. Take time to reflect each day, because that will truly make a difference.
Yeah, because reflection is going to increase our self-awareness of ourselves and how others perceive us. And oh, you've changed. And
I'm so sorry, I don't know what's happened.
there you go. Keep it there. Keep it there. Perfect.
It should be good now. Great.
Go. Okay, cool. Yes, so very important. And they are 3 amazing tips. So thank you. Now, you mentioned believing in yourself as the first one. So let's talk a little bit about you and kind of uncover what makes you the super house that you are, because you are. I have an enormous respect for you and all that you've done, and being a dedicated mother and a dedicated wife. So I know that your personal story, you have had difficulties both in business and your personal life. And what's amazing about you is every single time you've just picked yourself back up. I think the next day, I mean, fair, I hope there's some realisticness in there where you've had a few days of collapsing. But anyway, very quickly, you've picked yourself back up and just gone, right, what's the next thing? And to me, that is embodying your first principle, which is this belief in yourself. So how do you do that? How have you done it? Because we train these skills in so that they're unconscious, right? So I know that you're probably going to say, I don't know, I just do. But if you use that tool of reflection and you can look back and think, how can you do it so that it's useful for other people? I just think we can learn so much from how you are as a person. Because the chips have been down for you. It hasn't been an easy ride. And yet every single time you've risen to the occasion and become the next version of yourself, which, to be honest, is what this whole summit is about. You know, so you've done that. How do you do it?
Look, you know, I won't ever say anything's easy, but I will say for some people it's easier than others. Would you agree?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I believe, you know, once we start to understand our behavior style, my natural style is to look at my cup and to see it full.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, my husband, my gorgeous husband, his natural style would be look at that same cup and see it's pretty empty.
Right.
And so I do believe that it is easier for some people to go, this has happened, that was really crap, but it's easier to turn those thoughts. And I think the more that we start to practice it, so everyone can do this, the more we start to practice being able to change those thoughts,
yes,
to reflect it back, oh, let that thought just travel through and back out, and then replace it with something more positive.
Yes.
Has been something that I've done since I was young.
Yes.
Now, I don't know why. I don't know if it was something that I read that triggered it, or just that it's part of that natural behavior style. Dale Carnegie, I remember when I was doing this book, they said, you're that female version. And I'd never read his book and I didn't understand it. When I started to read his book, I was like, oh my gosh, we have a lot of similarities in our younger life as well.
Mm.
And, you know, I was actually orphaned and then adopted by some beautiful people in Australia and brought up in Australia. And unfortunately, though, my mum died when I was 16, and she did die in front of me very suddenly. And then my father died of a painful cancer. And, of course, they're always with me. So we will have a lot of things that happen in our life that we don't plan. And when we do plan things, other things will happen along the way. And I think life is really about being flexible and adaptable.
Absolutely.
yeah, you know, we always talk about, you know, shoot for the stars and maybe you'll hit the moon. Great. You know, it's what happens in between along the way and how we grow and how, you know, they say, you know, life happens to some people. And some people will have plans, but what I've learned and really understood is don't expect things from other people. And maybe it was a harsh lesson I learned as a young person, maybe even, you know, losing your mum and losing some dreams. Maybe not expect things from people. I could expect from me. And I think understanding your values is another big thing, but not expecting other people to live to your values. I think was a huge turning point because what I value, my husband may not value. And I can't be mad at him for not valuing what I value. But what it does mean is I need to step into my values. So sometimes people say, you know, honesty, people have to be honest with me. Well, actually, you have to be honest with you and honest with yourself, but that might not be their top value. So it's hard to expect that from the other person. So maybe that's a harsh lesson to learn, and maybe you don't need to learn that lesson, but it was a lesson that I learned. And I think that's allowed me to step through situations that have happened throughout our lifetime. You know, I received 4 illnesses, 4 individual illnesses. I still live with today, but they're, you know, they call them invisible. You know, Hashimoto's, Sjogren's, rheumatoid, celiac, that sort of thing. So they're, you know, you can't see them, but you have to live with them. And I remember saying, okay, thank you so much. I think I have enough now. I don't want any more. And we all have periods of life, you know. I think we can have everything, but we can't have it in the same season. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So when you said to me about being this great mom and this great wife, you don't always feel like a great wife. You don't always feel like a great mom at times. And when my husband had his collapse and I, you know, stepped up and took over the reins, I had to leave my children in a way. And that was, my whole life had been spent looking after them once they came into the world and providing what I could through time, nurture, love, and, you know, my home businesses. Well, now I wasn't at home and I wasn't providing those things, but my husband and I did a role reversal because I thought if I'm going to do this, you know, would you do that? Because at least I can feel comfortable knowing that someone is there for them as well. And I know we all have different things, and some families, everyone works, all those wonderful things that happen for people. But I think it's individual, and I would never say you have to do what I did. And I wouldn't recommend it. I look back in life, if someone had told me that I was going to work 7 days a week for like 10 years, would I have done that? No. But it's been, you know, a great journey along the way. And now we're in another crisis.
Yeah.
And I don't think I handled this crisis that well. You know, once the COVID came, I flew back from Egypt. I self-isolated for 2 weeks before it was brought in by the Australian government because I thought I would hate to bring something home to the family. So we had a spot that I could do that. We were all well. I was with 750 women from around the world in Egypt, and no one got COVID. So that was great news. But I remember, you know, once this happened, I thought, oh, right, another crisis. I'm going to activate everything, which is what I did in the first crisis that I went through with my husband, the GFC. So I activated everything. You know, I'm just about finished my master's in leadership at the Deakin University, which has been a great journey as well. But I did my strength coaching. I'm working at Singularity University. You know, all these things I just started activating. And I think COVID was a time really to step back and reflect.
Yeah.
To be more conscious.
Yeah.
And so even though my book was supposed to be out last year, The Conscious Leader, this is just one of the workshop books. What happened was it was a time to slow down. It was a time to reflect. And I think it was a time to be more generous, which is what I'm doing at the moment. being more generous of time and giving as much as we can to others. So 2019, I had over 80 flights, 150 stages. I was flying everywhere, and I decided in 2020 I would need to be home more. Just didn't know all our stages and all our face-to-face work would disappear overnight.
Yeah.
So once again, we are rebuilding, and I feel like I'm rebuilding a softer, kinder, more conscious person, and yes, a better mum and a better wife, because I'm definitely here more.
Yeah. I love that. I see it too as a great time to reflect and go within and re-emerge more compassionate and caring for one another, for ourselves, and for the planet as well, you know. So I know that you mentioned in your new book, The Conscious Leader, and you kind of alluded to it just now, that a leader is somebody who can, you know, not just a great leader when everything's going well and we're all doing brilliantly, but a leader is someone who can lead through times of crisis. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes, and you know, it's interesting because, you know, to anyone who listens to this, if I said to you, you know, what are 3 qualities of a leader that you love to work with or to see in the world? In actual fact, I'm going to ask you, Sally, what are 3 qualities that you love in a leader?
That they care about others and things that are greater than themselves, and holding that value, they make all the decisions from that place. You know, if we just look across the ocean, where we've had massive leadership shakeups, haven't we? You know, it just screams out to have leaders who are thinking about everybody else and about the world as a connected whole, to me, instead of encouraging division and separatism and what's best for this part, you know. So what's important to me is a leader who thinks greater than themselves and makes all decisions with that in mind, the highest purpose in mind, and somebody who recognizes the interconnected nature of us as humans, as societies and communities, and as a world. So, you know, I think that COVID has, there was a great opportunity to recognize, if we didn't before, that we're all interconnected, and something that affects us over there can affect us over here, right? And I feel like we've lost that a little bit. And now what's happening is decisions are being made at the local levels, at country levels. You know, we're arguing over who's getting the vaccinations. Like, can we not learn that we're all interconnected and make our decisions for the greater whole, the greater good?
Yeah, and there were some great things that happened too with those needles. They started to send them to some of the poorer countries as well. I think one of our shipments might have gone to Papua New Guinea and one to Africa, because if we didn't help vaccinate them as well, then it's just going to keep on spreading, you know, and killing more people. So there has been that. So what I think I got from you was, the first one is care. The second one is thinking of the greater good. And the third one in a leader, that everything's connected.
Yeah, and making decisions from those values. So not you know, not going into fear, but making decisions from what can we do for everybody for the greater good.
So Sally, to me, I would believe that there are 3 skills that you have as a leader. And look at what you're doing, 21-day conference about to start as well. And so, you know, we look at things and we know, and so we have this. So whatever you have thought about out there during this conversation, you know, those 3 things, I bet that's you as well. Because we see these traits and we recognize these traits, and this is what we want the world to have, and we've got those. And so whatever you said is just right. But also what we can do is start to add other things to our toolkit. So what the conscious leader does in the first chapter is allow you to identify your leadership style And then it shows you all those other styles that we hear about in the world today, right? So the charismatic, everything, and it shows the strengths and the weaknesses of those. So you can go, oh, I'd love that. Oh no, I do that. I don't want to do that anymore. So you can start to build your own toolkit of that leader that you want to aspire to be, and for others to be able to follow. You know, we know everyone leads themselves, right? Self-leadership, everyone leads themselves every day. Maybe not always to good outcomes, right? But once we start to become a little bit more conscious about that, that's where the difference happens, because most of the time we're just in that reactive, you know, subconscious mind. We don't think about how to put toothpaste on our toothbrush or which tooth to brush. Unless we end up with something sore in our mouth, then we become more conscious about where it goes. And so I think we need to think of leadership a little bit maybe as that, you know, there is a little bit of a sore in the world today. And I don't think we can just have one leader that comes into positional power that's going to solve it for us. I truly believe that it's each and every one of us that need to fix those little sores that we have that aren't working so well in the world. And maybe we're not the best leader we could be. However, this book is providing all those skills and tools that you can recognize and decide what you'd love. And I do believe in situational leadership, because not every skill I have for one project is needed for another project. Sometimes I need to bring in some other skills and for that project. I think you understand what I'm saying, Sally?
Yeah.
If I'm working on a people project, I might really need to bring in those people skills. If I'm working on a compliance project, I need to bring in some more of my more bureaucratic leadership skills that I could bring in for that. So that's what it allows you to do. Just allows you to identify in the first chapter. And then the second chapter is all about becoming that more conscious, emotionally intelligent leader, where we're conscious of self, conscious of others, and conscious of context, which is really the things that you've just been speaking about as well. And I know for mental health, with the people I work with, if you spend your time thinking about you, how this is affecting you, what that person is doing to you, you will never be well. Once you are more of service, of how you can help others, life changes. And some naturally have that gift, some find out about it, and some never do, and will never really be happy.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you come to that conclusion? How did you, was it personal, or is it through your experience of working with so many people? And sort of a double-edged question, how did you, because I know you've sort of said to me before that the conscious leader it just needed to be written, but how do you what do you think the push is to have it written now? Like, what are you seeing in the world that you know you can change if we start to step into being more conscious and aware?
Yeah, I believe that through body language, through working with body language for 25 years, that I really started to understand that I am conscious of who I'm speaking to, what's happening, but I see that it, you know, there are a few and far between of us that are really conscious about those actions, conscious about that person in front of us. They'll be looking over there, talking to them, but I want to go here. There's all these different things happening all the time. And if we can just stop in those moments and just be present, you know, we learn from the past. And in actual fact, everything we've already said is in the past. You know, with just that click of the fingers, everything we've said is now past, right? And we spend a lot of time looking into the future, but the present really is that gift, which we've all heard of before. And being conscious is being present. So I really wanted to write this book for this decade, and it was supposed to be out last year. In actual fact, 2019, but I think 2019 would have been too early. 2020, I really needed to go through COVID to add more into the conscious leader for this decade coming that we're, you know, heading into. And the 21st century starts this year, doesn't it? So It is the perfect book for this because I believe there is a lot more consciousness in the world. There is a lot more people caring for the trees, the plants, the animals. COVID allowed people to see skies and mountains that they'd never seen before in some of the countries. So it's had a lot of great outcomes, I guess, for the universe that way, with the reduced fumes and fuels and different things that happened for that short period of maybe 6 months where the world shut down. So it just goes to show that there is something possible there. And when we put our mind to things, we actually make them happen. So I don't know why we really haven't put our mind to some of the most important things. We spend trillions to look at being able to go to outer space, yet we haven't solved our rubbish problem. They're saying because of outer space, they're working on how to get rid of rubbish because they've now littered, the galaxy up there, on what to do with it. So sometimes they need these bigger plans to be able to, I guess it was like $1 million handshake, even though it's a little plan. For me to do that, I wanted to do more. So sometimes when people, shoot for those stars, they do find some solutions that we need on the planet here. I feel drones can be an amazing thing to be able to get food to people where normally we couldn't. When there's disasters, they can get in to see what's going on. But once again, then the countries have to try and trust the other countries that they're not spying. So the sooner that we can come together as a whole to make a difference. But one of the biggest things, I guess, for us as human beings is to be able to let go of that ego of being right. And that is one of our big things that holds us back. So that's why I love this emotional intelligence. And I know a report came out from Deloitte and another company that said, by 2030, all these leaders are going to have this high emotional intelligence. I'm like, why are we waiting till 2030? So let's make it happen, so that we go into that in the second chapter of the book.
Yeah, completely. So give us, well, first I want to ask you a question. What does conscious mean to you? Is it presence, or is it awareness? When you wrote The Conscious Leader, what do you mean by conscious?
I know, because you certainly hope that all leaders are conscious, otherwise they'd be unconscious, right? And there's that consciousness of all the connectiveness that you were speaking about before as well. Being conscious is being in the present, being aware. It's a different awareness. In actual fact, I often find it's almost like I'm looking down at that situation or at that time too. And I'm just conscious of not just the person in front of me, but also it's like that global listening where you take everything into account.
Yeah, you're expanded, right? So your senses are expanded too. So it's conscious of yourself, conscious of the person that you're with, and conscious of the situation and the context. Yeah. So in your book, do you have, or can you give us, because I always like to bring it back to the practicable and how we can best help, and I know you're the same, and serve. So with this summit, it's all about helping people step beyond their limitations, whatever that means to individuals, whether that's physical, mental, spiritual, whatever. Stepping beyond where you think your limits are. So with the conscious leader, we need to get present. Can you give us some of your tools or practical tips of how to do that in everyday life, that somebody could take today and it would make a difference in their lives, whether it's family, because you're a leader in your family, or if you're running a business within your business?
Yeah, so I think one of the top tips with being more conscious is ego, let it go. Yep, so let go of being right. That's what holds us back a lot from being that great leader, and just letting go and being present in that moment. it's amazing what can come out of it.
Yes.
You know, having that global listening where you can take into that context, that person, where you're not sitting waiting. Like today, when you said, would you like to have some structured questions? And I said, no, just let it flow, because, you know, I'm not then in that moment going, oh, this is the question, this is how I'm going to respond. You know, it's more of what is needed in this moment.
Yes.
And so I think when you open your heart, and like, I know, you know, the head, heart and gut, I tend to go, well, the guts, you know, I get that gut feeling, yeah, this is what we need to do, you know, when I'm making decisions. But they say all the really right decisions come from the heart. So I think at times it's just being a little bit conscious more and getting out of here and into here when you are making those decisions. I generally will say to people, one of the great tools is what's heavy and what's light. You know, what makes you smile and what makes it feel awful. And if you're doing things that are making you feel heavy all the time, then guess what's going to happen?
Yeah.
You know, so be conscious of those things that are making you heavy, and what can you do about them, and how can you release them?
Yes, brilliant. So whether we're with family, or whether we're in a boardroom, or whether we're leading a seminar, when we get into a situation where there's friction, instead of holding on to, but this is my way and your way is wrong, or no, I don't agree with what you're saying, you know, that divisiveness, that separatism, just taking a moment to remember to come back to what's present now, like let all that go. What are you saying? What am I saying, and how am I coming across? What's this situation, and what's the higher aim as well? I guess that would be relevant. What are we trying to achieve? And instead of getting stuck in the detail of it has to be my way, rising above that. I love the way you dropped that in earlier. When we're conscious, rising above those little levels and kind of thinking of the overall picture again. I think that's
before you have a difficult, absolutely, and before you have that difficult conversation, what is the outcome that you'd like from it, so that you can take a moment to prepare, but then just let it flow. You know, I love when you said my way or the highway, because there's 4 things that we fall into when we're working in our more basement of our leadership style. It's either 1, it's my way or the highway. 2, you're going to baffle them with bullshit rules.
Yes.
So if something didn't work, here's another rule. This is what you have to do. This is what you have to do. This is what you have to do. You know, complain until no one really knows what they're doing. You know, there's the hangman, where there's that leadership style where they sit back and, you know, if everything goes right, they're like, hey, yep, great. And if it goes wrong, then they hang that person out to dry. It wasn't me, it was them. You know, so we do have a little bit of a look at that. And then there's that hub and spoke, that person that wants to get in the middle, and they separate everything so no one really knows what the other person's doing, and the communication gets really fragmented. So that tends to be the 4 ways we get into basements with things. We either don't communicate well, we tell them it's that way or the highway, we sit back and then we blame the others, or we just keep making another rule and another rule.
Yeah.
And that's when we're not conscious.
Yeah. So the antidote of that is to meet it all with being conscious of yourself, the others, and the context, and what you want to get out of it. Love, which is exactly what we did. We said, what do we want to do? We want to serve the people listening. We want to give them practical takeaways of how they can move out of where they feel stuck or get to the next level. Let's go. Let's flow and let's go.
Let's flow and go. So what I would love to offer through this time is probably the chapter 4, which is the language for leadership. It's the language that comes in here, the language that comes out here, and the language that comes here. And it makes the biggest difference to our lives, to the lives of the people we love, and to the people that we're meeting. So it's going to help us create more win-wins in life and create better connections and the way that we communicate. You know, I believe it's still the number one problem, real problem that we have on the planet today. And just like you were saying before, to be able to be that bigger thinker and to be able to communicate in a better way.
Well, that would be awesome and is very generous of you. So thank you. And thank you for your time today. I know, you, as I've said, you're a super busy lady. Even though you're at home, you're still very busy this year. So I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate all the good you do in the work, because you definitely have that mindset of doing for others. And I just love that about you. And thank you so much. We'll make sure that obviously we have links to everything where you can find Kath's books below this video. So thank you so much for your time, Kath.
Pleasure. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. See you soon. Lots of love.